Hi guys, so this is the beginning of lesson 13. In lesson 12, we were looking at simple number lines. And with our simple number lines, little hint, they were simple because the denominator was the same for every point on the number line that we're looking at. So today we're going to go up a notch just a little bit, and we're going to look at what we call more complex number lines. Now they're not still really challenging, but the difficulty level is being raised because when we look at these number lines, the fractions that we write underneath them might not all have the same denominator. So think halves, fourths, eighths, and how those kind of relate to each other as we go through this. Okay, so on my first question here, I have a number line from 0 to 1. And when we look at this, we can say, ooh, okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. So technically, if I was trying to figure out this spot right here, I would say, oh, that is in fourths and it's 2/4. However, in today's lesson, we might not write it as 2/4. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so over here on my left, I have 3 fractions. I don't want to place those 3 fractions in the correct place on this number line. Okay, so I'm going to start with an easy one. Okay, so since we know that this number line is in fourths, anything that has a denominator in fourths are the first thing that we're going to want to place because those are the easy ones. Okay, so I have 1/4. So when I look at this, if this is in fourths, 1/4 would be 0/4, 1/4 right there. So I'm going to grab that. Hopefully it works. There we go. We're going to grab it and put it right there. Okay, so we have halves and we have 3/4. Okay, so this other one is in fourths, so we have to figure out where to put that. Start with those ones that have that denominator fourths because this is what this is in. 1, 2, 3. So 3/4 is going to go underneath that hash right there. That's 1, 2, 3/4 right there. Okay, so my last one that I have is a half. Okay, so this one's kind of pretty simple to figure out where it goes because I only have one hash left. And you can be like, hey, it has to go right there. But I want to know the evidence or the proof of why it goes right there. So let's look at our evidence here. Okay, so the easiest way to figure this out is if I convert it or rename this fraction into fourths, is that spot going to be right thing? So if I make an equivalent fraction here, 1/2 equals how many fourths? Figure out the math. It's always multiplication or division. 2 times 2 equals 4, and 1 times 2 equals 2. So 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4. So I can take that fraction of 1/2 and put it where 2/4 would be, and it's in the right place. Now I can identify this spot right here in this number line by the fraction 1/2. And I can also, oops, it didn't take it. So I'm going to have to rewrite it over here. I can also identify it as 2/4. Are there any other places on this number line that have 2 different names? Ooh, I hope you're thinking yes. Okay. And the one you're probably thinking of is 1. 1 can also be called 4/4. But there's another spot on this number line that it can go by another name. And that's the 0. 0 can also be identified as 0/4. So a bunch of these have different names on this one. 0 is 0/4, 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4, and 1 is the same thing as 4/4. Okay, so that would be in picture form. It would be like, oh, here's a pie, and you cut into fourths, and you have none of it. Okay, and here's that same pie, and in this one you have 1/4. And in this one, you have half of it, or 2/4. And this one, you get 3/4. And then right here, you get 4/4, or the whole thing, one whole pie. Okay, so that's kind of how that relates with our drawings and a little illustration to go with it. So let's look at another number line. Okay, this one goes from 0 to 1, has a whole bunch of sections in the middle. Don't get freaked out, but there's a whole bunch of fractions we're going to put over here. So let's first figure out how many sections is this divided into. So I have 1, hold on, my pen's not working. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my denominator is going to be 8ths. So let's pull out those fractions over here and figure out where they would go first. So Okay, so since this is divided into eighths, we're going to pull out, grab our fractions over here that are already in eighths. So I have 3/8, I have 2/8, I have 8/8, and I have 7/8. Okay, so we can do this. Okay, so this is 0/8. So 1, nope, don't have to put that there, 2. Okay, so 2/8 goes right there. So then if that's 1/8, 2/8, 3/8 goes right next door. So I have to do 8/8 and 7/8. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So right here's 7/8. And then 8/8 is going to go right next door underneath 1. So we have 1, also known as 8/8. Okay, so we have two fractions left, 3/4 and 1/2. So we're going to do what I showed you earlier. We're going to convert those into eighths so that we can figure out where they go precisely on this line. Because I have 1, 2, 3, 4 spots left, and I only have 2 numbers. So I have to figure out the perfect spot to put them in. So I have to figure out my equivalent fraction. So 4 times what equals 8? Well, 4 times 2 equals 8. So I'm going to do 3 times 2. And 3/4 is going to go in the spot where 6/8 would be. And then 1/2, 2 times 4 is 8. And 1 times 4 is 4. So 1/2 is going to go in the spot where 4/8 is. So 3/4, we're going to take over to 6/8. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is equivalent to 6/8. And then 1/2 is going to go where 4/8 is. So 0/8, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, right there in the middle. So this is equivalent to 4/8. Okay, so what would go in those missing spaces? I'm going to give you a second to think about it, and then hit pause if you have to think, and then come back for the answer. Okay, guys, so what would go right here? It's between 0/8 and 2/8. Oh, I hope you're thinking 1/8. Yes. And then over here between 1/2 and 3/4, what would this be right here? Well, we have to think 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. 6/8. What would go between 4/8 and 6/8? I hope you're thinking 5/8. Okay, so we're going to do another example. This one's a little different because here I'm not putting my fractions between 0 and 1. I'm now going into that whole mixed number, that mixed number world, or our whole numbers that we have to figure out in between. So this time I just have two numbers that I want to place. I want to place 4 and 1/4, and I want to place 3 and 2/4. So first of all, let's figure out how many sections are between each of these whole numbers. So between 3 and 4, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so notice I'm counting the spaces. I'm not counting the hashes, so it's the space. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is in eighths again. Okay, and let's just double check and make sure we have the same thing between 4 and 5. We should, unless Mrs. Lehman made a mistake, but you know what happens. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, so each of these is divided into eighths. So we have to figure out where is 4 and 1/4 going to go. So we have to convert that into eighths. And we have to figure out where is 3 and 2/4 going to go. So we have to convert that into eighths. So let's start with 3 and 2/4. So 2/4 converted into eighths. 4 times 2 is 8. So 2 times 2 is 4. So 3 and 2/4 is going to get put where 3 and 4/8 would be. So let's do that. Okay, so here's 3. 3 and 1/8, 3 and 2/8, 3 and 3/8, 3 and 4/8. So it's going to go right here. So I'm going to grab that. And hold on, it's going to go with me, hopefully. 1, 2, 3. It's going to go right there. It's kind of a big, I'll make it a little smaller. There we go. So we can fit that right there underneath there. Okay, and our next one is 4 and 1/4. So we have to convert that into eighths. So 4 times 2 is 8, and 1 times 2 is 2. So 4 and 1/4 is going to go right where 4 and 2/8 would be. So here's our 4 and 1/4. I'll make it a little smaller to start with. Okay, so I have 4 and 1/8, 4 and 2/8. So it's going to go right there. Okay. So I have one more question. But the big skill here is this thing you have to remember is If the denominator is different from the amount of sections that you have between the numbers, you have to convert them into equivalent fractions so you can make sure that you're putting your fraction or your mixed number in the exact perfect spot. Okay, so here's my last one, and I don't have a lot going on here, so this one's going to take a little bit more work. I just have a number line that has a beginning and an end. So this is the beginnings of creating a line plot with these fractions, okay? So I have 4 things that I want to put on this number line. I want 1 7/8, 3/4, 1/2, and 5/8. So I need to look at this and say, oh, well, since I have regular fractions, I have to start at 0, but then since I have 1 7/8 as a mixed number, I have to end at 2. So all of these things are going to fit between 0 and 2. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify that this is 0. I chose black, but it came out as red. There we go, 0. This is going to be 2. Halfway in between, I'm going to have to put a hash, and that's going to become 1. Okay, so we need to look at this. We have eighths, fourths, halves, and eighths. Okay, so if I just cut these in half, will that show me exactly where my eighths are going to go? Nope. Okay, so when I look at this, we always want to pick the biggest denominator, and that's what we want to cut our sections into. So since we have 7/8 and 5/8, we want to have eighths going in our sections. So just as a reminder, we talked about this earlier this year, but if you want to break something into 8 sections, you need to draw 7 lines, and I already have 1 line, so we need to do 6 more. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that should give me 8 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, there's eighths. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and that should give me 8 sections in between there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep. Okay, so now that I have all those sections, then I need to figure out where are these numbers going to go. So since we have eighths, we can put our eighths up pretty quickly. So 5/8 is going to go between 0 and 1. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8. So it's going to sit right there. 1 7/8 is going to go between 1 and 2. So 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8 is going to be smashed up against a 2 right there. Okay, and then we have to figure out 3/4 and 1/2. Okay, I know most of you are probably thinking, oh, I know what 1/2 is. Okay, so since it's eighths, 2 times 4 is 8, 1 times 4 is 4. So 1/2 is going to go right where 4/8 would be. So 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. 1/2 is going to go right there next to 5/8. Okay, and then we have 3/4. So we need to convert that into eighths. 4 times 2 is 8. 3 times 2 is 6. So 3/4 is going to go right where 6/8 is. So 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8 right there. So those 3 are smashed right up against each other. So when we look at this, we have 1/2, which is equal to 4/8. Then we have 5/8. 3/4 is equal to 6/8. So they are literally bang, bang, bang right next to each other. Okay, guys? So we're going to continue this, and we're actually going to start making line plots with fractions here soon. So hopefully you're understanding how to figure out where to put these numbers that don't have the same denominator as what you're breaking your number line into. Okay, I will have a practice for you on this. Good luck. Have a great day.